Hi everyone, Zach here, and welcome to video 60 in this series on developing a survival game in Unreal Engine. Today's video will be one of two videos for creating our volumetric clouds. In this video, we will be creating our base material that we'll use to build up our clouds. All the systems that we are creating, from the rain and lightning to these clouds, will be tied together in our dynamic weather system. This video and this series have been brought to you by Patreon sponsors, and you too can support this channel, and all you have to do is click that like button below. It really helps this channel out. And if you want to make sure you know when the new tutorials are released, or you want to be here for the live streams, make sure to click the subscribe button and turn on all notifications. And if you want to take your support just a bit further and want early access to the videos and access to the project files, consider becoming a Patreon sponsor. Alrighty, open up your project and we'll make a start. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the editor. Now, we have volumetric clouds already. Why aren't we using these? Well, one, we can't dynamically change them too much. All we can really do is, if we find our volumetric clouds, is change our layering, our height, which we can do a fair amount with. Like, we can make the cumulonimbus clouds in the back there taller. Sadly, we'll be losing the cumulonimbus clouds. We can change the trace, and we can change this, but we can't do too much with it. So what we're going to do today is actually make it a little bit more, well, dynamic and a little bit more realistic. We are losing some of the realism, and we're only going to have one cloud type, just because while I know how to make multiple cloud types, I don't have the ability to make the textures that we need to do it. And because I don't have that ability, we're gonna not make them. But what we need to do before we get started is actually add in a plugin that we're not gonna use. So we're just gonna go to plugins, and we're gonna search for Volumetrics, and we're gonna enable this plugin, and then go ahead and restart your editor. And I'll come back after I've restarted mine. Alright, so we're back in the editor. I'm just going to close that out, and what we want to do now is click the view options and show plugin content. And I'm just going to scroll all the way down to find Volumetrics, and I'm going to type in VT for volume texture. This is a new texture type as of 4.25, I think. And we're gonna use this to create our clouds. Now, this is in 4.25 because these are the things that you could use in 4.25 to make your clouds. Again, it's not fully optimized, so I went ahead and jumped to 4.26 for this tutorial, clearly. And we're going to want to copy those into a new folder. So we're actually going to, unfortunately, jump back to our survival content just for a moment and create the folder we need. We're gonna go to textures, weather systems, and in our weather systems, we're gonna create a new folder called clouds. And actually, I'm going to move the sparks into a folder called lightning, just so that things are kept separate. Probably should have done that when we did the lightning, but for some reason I went, oh, we're not gonna really need to worry about it too much. All right, so let's go back down to volumetrics. Let's actually pop up in clouds first. Now let's go down to volumetrics. Again, type in VT. And I'm going to take all of them, even though I'm not going to use all of them. And I'm going to move them into our clouds, or copy them. The next thing we're going to do is go to materials. And in materials, get rid of the search for VT. We're going to go into weather systems, and we're going to create a folder called, well, clouds, because we're going to create a cloud material now. And our cloud material, what we're going to do is we're going to create three materials for it, really, or three parts of the material. We'll start with the primary material, which is M. I'm going to call it custom clouds. Just pop this open. And in here, what we're going to do is change our material type. And this is no longer a surface, it's a volume material. Now we have albedo instead of color. We have emissive color, which is going to be important for nighttime. We have our extinction as well, and we don't need to worry about ambient occlusion. We are going to change this to unlit, and this is additive. There we go. We do want shadows from this, and we are going to scroll down to translucency. We want to apply fogging. We want to compute fog per pixel, which does make it a bit intensive. So if that causes problems for you, feel free to remove that. Everything else is fine there. And I'm just going to check all our other settings are where I want them. I haven't made any other changes, but I'm always paranoid that there will be minor differences that I don't catch between recording and, well, now. We're going to have two output nodes. So this is the first output node. And the second output node we need is our volumetrics output. And so we're going to right click and search for volumetric advanced or advanced output. So that second one, not the input, the output. Now, I have read through these. I don't understand what they are really, but I can tell you we need them. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with we're going to create a scalar parameter for everything but the conservative density down here. So right click phase G, promote to parameter, and this will be phase G. Do the same for phase G2. We'll set values for these in just a moment. And same for phase blend, same for the multi-scattering, same for our multi-scattering occlusion, and then same for our multi-scattering eccentricity. Move them all over here so there's a little bit over in between them. Makes it a little bit easier to read what we're doing, I guess. All right, and I'm just going to quickly comment this section out as our volumetrics. That's what it is, it's the volumetrics. It's the metrics for our volume. So for our default setting on phase G, we're gonna go to 0.5. And if you read the material here, it's between -1 and 1. So we're just gonna default that out to -1 and 1. I'm gonna put this in a category called volumetrics, just so it's gonna be easier to work with this down the road. For our phase G2, we will default this to -0.5. And again, there is a range on this one of between -1 and 1. For our phase blend, I'm going to set this to a default of make sure to set this to volumetrics as well. For phase blend, I'm going to set this to a value of 0.2. And again, if we look at our phase blend, it has a range of 0 to 1. So we're going to set that to 1 on our max. For our multi-scattering contribution, we're going to set this to a value of 1 as default. By the way, we will be changing these. And it says it goes 0 to 1. I have found we can go above. Actually, with phase blend, I found we can go below 0 and have an effect as well. For our multi-scattering, it's 0. Oh, hang on. Again, set that to volumetrics. Multi-scattering, we're gonna also set that to volumetrics. Multi-scattering occlusion, well, again, we have it 0 to 1. Again, I've also found that, well, that one doesn't seem to really do much when we go over it, but we're gonna default it out to 0.1. For our multi-scattering eccentricity, again, we have a range provided of 0 to 1 for that. So again, we'll default that out to 1, our max to 1, and we'll default it out to 0.1 as well. All right, now again, we will be changing these down the road. Don't worry about the settings right now. Really don't. I can't find any good documentation on understanding it, so I'm not gonna try. Next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna set our base color for our clouds, and we're gonna use 2 colors to do this. So we're gonna hold the 3 key down and click promote to parameter, and this is our primary color. And then we're gonna duplicate that node down here, and this is going to be our extinction color. So our primary color is going to be a slightly off-white. So I'm just going to open this up, pop that open somehow. There we come on. And we can just, kind of move it to an off-white. I know that I want to use a particular shade of white. So instead of just scrolling through until I find it, I'm going to use C0 or Charlie 0, Charlie Delta, Charlie Delta 0, 0. So we have that nice sort of off-white. We get rid of our alpha with that one as well. And then for our extinction color, well, we want a grayish blue color. And we could just move this into that range and try to hunt down a sort of grayish blue. It's more purplish, really. Closer to that sort of shade. Again, we're going to have no alpha on this, so those left two will be 0, 0, but I know that I'm going to use 61697 alpha 0, 0, and that's my extinction color. So I'm going to use these together to make both my albedo and my extinction. Well, actually, I'm just going to use the extinction for the extinction. Together, they'll make the albedo. So I'm going to come off the RGB, and I'm going to lurk between that and, well, what we'll do to our extinction. So from our extinction, I'm going to do a multiply, and what we get from this multiply will go directly into our B value there. I'm going to promote this B to a parameter, and this is my extinction scale, and I am going to add this to a category that I'm just going first. Before we go further, I have not set everything up correctly in this. These need to all be in volumetrics because this is going to get really confusing with the number of parameters we have. There we go. All right, so this I'm going to put into a category called color. Same with this one. Oops. And same for our extinction scale. For our extinction scale, I am going to put a min of -1, a max of 1, and I'm going to default it out to 0.05. This one's actually kind of powerful, like really kind of powerful. Now, what are we going to use for our lerp here? Well, we're going to lerp using a gradient based on altitude, which comes with our volumetric cloud system. So if we search for cloud sample attribute, we have our norm altitude layer. So like I said, we're going to use the altitude. We're going to lerp using that, and I'm just going to put a reroute into this. Don't know why I did it all the way up there when I'm going to actually have it down here. I'm going to line that up, and I'm going to move these back a bit. So what this is it's the gradient based on altitude. Oh, I said that right. And I am going to then take the result of that lerp, and I'm also going to multiply this by the same altitude. So we're going to use the altitude twice to create our base color. So this is now our base color. We have everything lovely and nice and set up in here. And actually, I lied. This is also going to affect our extinction. So this is our base color. And I'm actually going to expand this out a bit so I can put a second comment in here. And this bit here, which I'm just going to move these two parts and move the output node or the reroute node a bit to the right. This is our clouds go from primary to fade as gradient goes down. So that's what's happening here. As we move the altitude, we're fading between these two gradients that we've created. All right, we can take all of this and just directly plug that into our albedo. In fact, actually, I'm going to line up this with our albedo there. Everything else can move around it. All right, so that is our base color. For our extinction, we're going to come off of here, and I'm going to actually expand this comment out a bit, and I'm going to move this further down because we need some room. And we're going to do another multiply. And for this multiply, what we're going to do is we're going to, all the other math we're going to do, by the way, it's going to be back this way, is we're going to be covering our extinction. So to do that, I wanted to resize that. There we go. This is going to go straight into our extinction. So what we're doing here is we are fading, or fade out, uses color to do so. But it also is going to use our cloud type. Now, before we get into our cloud type, because that's going to be a lot of stuff we have to do for it, let's take care of our emissive color. Now, by default, we want our emissive color to be 0. So what we're going to do is create a lerp, and we're going to change the base values. Now, I am going to just use a scalar parameter, leave it at 0, and plug that into B. So this is daytime. That's all I'm going to say about that. That's daytime. And we're going to just go straight into our emissive color here. So during the daytime, we want no emissive color. Now I'm going to hold down the 1 key again, and I am going to create a parameter from this one called night emissive. And I'm going to plug this into our A, and I'm going to explain in a moment why night is A and day is B, but it has to be in that order. You can't switch them around unless you inverse what we're about to do in a moment. And I'm going to set this to a incredibly small value. I'm going to set it to 0.00001. This has to be in a very low number. Trust me, if it's at, say, 1, the map becomes blinding. So this is our lerp between emissive values based on, well, it's actually not daytime. It's not daytime versus nighttime. It's based on ambient lighting. So a better name for that actually wouldn't be nighttime emissive, and it shouldn't say daytime. It should be, bright sky, dark sky. But, I think about it as night and day. That's the main reason we're using it. I'm going to put this in a category called emissive. Now, we need to move between our daytime and our nighttime. Now, fortunately, or between dark sky and light sky, really. Fortunately, in 2.5, 6 nodes were introduced. And one of those 6 nodes tells us how bright our sky is. So that is our sky atmosphere view luminance. And there is no documentation on this one, really. And I'm going to have links in the description in this video and a later video talking about these 6 nodes. So this tells us the brightness of our sky, but it works on 3 vectors. We only need 2. So what we're going to do is a component mask, and we are going to mask our Z vector, so the green. There we go. sorry, blue. Wow, I made that mistake a couple of videos back as well. We are then going to raise this to a power of 1 for now, which really doesn't raise it because it's a power of 1. But if you need to change things out, we can using that power. And then we are going to take our result from this and multiply it. And I'm going to again hold down the 1 key, and I'm going to default this value out to 6. So we're multiplying our return value here by 6. Now this set of nodes, so if we change this value to affect when emissive starts. So when I say starts, when we go from 0 to our other value. So this value is really the most kind of important value outside of that node there in determining what our emissive value should be. And because, you know, we're using a lerp, which means we're going from 0 to 1 on the alpha, we're going to clamp this. Now, instead of clamps, you technically could use saturate. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'll probably use both, and we'll explore using both. But that goes into our alpha there. In fact, I'm just going to move that there. So it determines how bright the sky is. And really what this is doing is set emissive quality, actually it's gonna be quantity based, actually hang on, set emissive value based on light value. So at nighttime, the reason why we're doing this is at night, if we don't have this, then our stars, everything else, the sky, while they show up, there are just black blobs moving across the sky that are really hard to tell what's going on. Like, it's actually hard to tell them from the trees. So this will give character to our clouds. It also means that when we have rainstorms, our clouds will be a bit more interesting and a little bit more cool to look at. All right, now comes the really tricky part of today's video. And we're already about 20 minutes in. I think I've had to edit out me sneezing a couple of times. What we're going to do is we're going to create some stratus clouds. And I'm just going to start over here, somewhere far to the left. And we're going to first get a texture sample. Okay, I probably am too far to the left, but whatever, we can move it in a moment. And for our texture sample, I'm going to search for VT Perlin Whirly Balance. I'm going to use the one that's located in our weather systems cloud folder. And I am going to set this to be from shared rep, just so we have that set up. Notice we can't see anything in there yet. What we need to do is control its tiling. So what I'm going to do is move to the left a little bit again, do absolute, or actually world position. Okay, why can't I find world position? There it is, world position. We're going to use it as is, the absolute world position. We're going to do this twice because this isn't going to be very detailed. So we're going to layer this twice to get extra detail in. So to do that, what I'm going to do is pull from here, and I'm going to divide. And our divisions really are control around our tiling. So I'm just going to place that here. I'm going to put another reroute in actually because, yeah. Line that up, move that up there. So the top is going to be our detail and the bottom will be our base. I'm just going to leave that there for a moment. And for our divide, what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply. So our dividend will be multiplied in. And we need to use a very, very large number for this to work. Now, why are we using a large number? It's the sky. It's massive. Our tiling has to be huge for this to work. So instead of working with huge numbers, what we're going to do is multiply to make it huge. Just like when we were doing our tessellation to work with really small numbers, we used, you know, again, a multiply to make a really tiny number, or a really small number. Well, we used a divide, I can't remember. Whatever we used. We used a number that we can reasonably work with and then adjusted it so that it actually had a much different meaning. Much different? Wow. All right, so I'm going to hold down the 1 key twice and create 2 parameters. I'm going to convert this top one to our cloud detail tiling. So for this one, I am going to put this into my category called cloud. I am going to give a default value of 40 with a min of 25 and a max of 250. I worked those numbers out just by trial and error on what kind of looked reasonable. For our second one here, and again, you could just type these, and anytime I'm doing a non-converted parameter, so like here with a 0, I could have just gone to lerp and put a 0 in. That is a parameter. Here where we're doing this, again, I could go into B and put the number in I want, but I am going to put in for our B, I believe it's 10,000. Yeah, it's 10,000. And there we go. That is our B there. And this is our tiling control. So I'm just going to call this control. And I'm going to give myself a bit of space because I know what I'm going to be doing down the road, because we are probably going to do this in 2 videos. I am going to just go into the UV there. And now we have that nice little pink shade. We're going to have our cloud movement covered right here, by the way. I'm going to duplicate these nodes down here, plug into our reroute from there, and we're going to change this up just a little bit. What we need to do for this one is, this is no longer a detail tiling, this is just our cloud tiling. And for our cloud tiling, for our default, I am going to set this to 30 with a min of 8 and a max of 100. And we're going to change this to 100,000. So just add in a 0. There we go. And I'm going to duplicate this node down here and go into our UV there. And we get a bluish, oh no, it's still pink. It'll be sort of beige when we're done. All right, so we're gonna work on our bottom part first, because that's our general sort of cloud setup. And what we want to do is we want to set our, well, the amount of details that we're gonna allow to be added in, and then we're going to blend these two together. So the way we do that is we come off the red value here, and we're gonna be working a lot with our red channel, by the way, for this, because our red channel, if you're going to do multiple clouds, you're going to need the multiple channels. We're going to do an add node, and I'm going to put a reroute here, by the way, because we need to come around this in just a moment as well. And what we're going to add in, actually this is going to go into our B channel, just so this is a little bit easier to work with. What we're going to add in is a node that is extremely powerful for what we're doing. So we're going to hit 1 and create a new scalar parameter that will be our cloud detail add. So this is the additive part of our cloud detail, how much we're adding in. I cannot stress how powerful this node is. We're going to set it to a base value of 0.1, so it's going to be 10% of our max. So our min will be -1, our max will be 1. And again, just really want to comment, very powerful. Like you will be surprised how much this node affects everything. That goes into our A. So after that, we're going to start blending things together. So I'm just going to duplicate this node without hopefully doing what I just did there. Duplicate this. This is going to go into our B, and we'll take care of everything else in a moment and that reroute as well. Let's go back to our detail layer here, and we're going to use both our, so by the way, this is generating noise as well, but we're going to use both our green and our red channels. So what I'm going to do is we're going to switch between which of these is the greater of the values that we're looking at the time. And the way we do that is we take a max node, and the max node, well, picks the 2 values that are higher that we put in. So is A higher or B higher? And we're not just going to plug the green into B. What we're going to do is we are going to do a 1- node off our green, and we're going to check which of those 2 is higher. So we get this reddish color, by the way. All right, sorry, I'm just going to line those back up a little bit and put a reroute in for this one. Line those up. So with that done, what we need to do next is we need to use a contrast node. And there's a couple of contrast nodes we can use, but I'm just going to use cheap contrast. So the cheap contrast is similar to the edge in Photoshop. I barely understand how Photoshop works myself, despite having given you a texture that I made in Photoshop. And then for our contrast, we're going to do is promote this to a parameter, and this will be our cloud, or actually our detail contrast. And I am going to set this to a default value of 0 with, again, a min of 1 and a max of 1. And I'm going to start making sure I put these all in my cloud folder, or category, because these all relate to the cloud. Also, I'm going to rename this one cloud tiling with a proper capital T there. There we go. Just want to make sure none of these are listed in global emissive, global volumetrics, global color, global cloud. Yeah, I mean, it should be global, but not like global none or just global. All right, now we're going to take these and add them together. So what we're doing is we're creating noise. So this is our noise section. We're creating noise and variation within our clouds, and this is how we're doing it. And we're adding it together here. So we're going to take what we've added together, and then we're going to multiply it. So we're blending it together with add, and then we're just going to multiply it. And what we're going to multiply it by is our base sort of underlying cloud. Remember, the top is details. This is our base. So we're going to come from this reroute into our multiply here. And I'm going to put some reroutes in just so it's a little bit easier to see what's going on. All right, so we are now taking a really simple, non-too complex texture and making it a lot more detailed. And then we are going to set the density of our clouds. So how much of our sky is covered? And I'm just going to say on this that we're blending noise. And this is a part where we're going to pause real quick because we're already fairly far into this video, 30 minutes, and we're going to have to create a set of nodes that we need for this to fully operate. So we're going to go back to our main window here. We're going to go to our textures folder. We're going to go into our clouds in our texture folder, and we are going to create a linear color curve. So we've created curves before. You've seen us do curves. We did it all through everything we've done in Niagara. We're going to create a curve that's based on linear colors though. So I can never remember. We have to find the curve to begin with, and I always struggle with finding our curves. I think it's under miscellaneous. There it is, curve. And we get these three choices: curve float, curve linear color, curve vector. Technically, you could use vector as well and just use the first vector, but we're going to use linear color. And the reason why we're doing this is if you do want to add in more clouds, well, you have other colors than you can work with to set up your clouds, and you use the curves and of the color and your texture that you need for this to fully work, to have more than one layer of clouds, to sort of move between those layers of the texture, so the channels of the texture, to affect how the clouds display. We're only going to work with stratus clouds, so we're only going to have one color, and we're only going to set one color up in our curve here. And we'll, in the next video, when we do movement, we'll kind of explore all the settings we've put into this one. That also gives you time to play with it. And I'm just going to call this LCC altitude. So this stands for linear curve altitude. And again, we only really care about the red channel. So I'm going to get rid of all channels that aren't my red channel. And for my red channel, what we're going to do is I'm going to just add in 2 more keys. And I just want to kind of have them towards the middle there. And I'm going to take the last key here, and I'm going to set my last key's value to time 1. That's the first value, that's time, and value 0. So if I hover over this, by the way, it says time 1, value 0. For this one, I do want to go a little bit before our -1 there. Or sorry, -1, our 0, and I want to move it to the right, which does give me a -0.1. That's fine. -0.1 is perfectly fine for this. For our first value, I'm actually going to work with our middle value here, or our third value. For our third value, what I want to do is I wanted this around, actually I'm going to move this one to the right a bit. That's going to be at 0.1 just for a moment. I want to move this to 0.3, and I'm going to set the value to 5. So I'm just going to move it down. There it is at 5. So 0.3 and 5. And then next I'm going to take this one, and I'm going to move this one to, well, 0.1. That was not intentional. And I am going to then move this up to a value of 1. I'm having a hard time finding the value of 1, so I'm just going to set the value of 1 there because it's way above the screen. I am going to just remember how to realign this thing. I always, in curves, always struggle trying to remember where my zoom to fit. There we go. I want all these nodes selected. Zoom to fit. There we go. Now, this is going to control our clouds. Now, this is really kind of hideous looking. So what we're going to do is we are going to change some of these values, not all of them. So you know how we've been making the, holding down the keys and hitting 1? We're going to do that for some of them, but not all the values. We're going to take this value here, and we're going to hit 1. We have that nice curve there. We're going to take this top value here and hit 1. So again, we have that nice curve there. For our second value here, actually I don't want this at 0.5. You know what? We will move this to 0 for now. We'll come back to 0.5 later on. I'm going to not make it a linear. I'm going to leave it linear. I'm not going to make it a proper curve. I'm going to take this value though, and I'm going to push it up a bit so that we get a very steep rise on our curve here, and really want this around 30 to be fair. So let me just double check what I've done with that value. Interesting. It's not letting me actually see what that value is. I'm kind of annoyed by that. Okay, that looks about right about there. For our value up here, what I'm going to do is actually going to try to flatten this curve just a bit. There we go. And that is going to control, using the red channel of our textures, based on the altitude, our clouds. Now, I don't really care about the other channels. If we need to set it, I think the only one we need to care about after this might be the alpha channel. But now we have this sort of reddish thing over there. That's what we want to see. I'm going to then create a curve atlas, and I always kind of forget where that's located as well. There it is, under miscellaneous. So we're gonna create a curve atlas, which is under miscellaneous curve atlas, and I'm just gonna name the CA curve atlas altitude. And I'm just going to open this up, and you can increase the display if you want. In fact, I'm going to do a 2048, so power of 2s, by the way. And I'm going to add in a gradient curve, and I'm going to select my curve altitude. By the way, the curves for linear colors are how the zenith in the old sky used to work, as you just saw when I did that. So if I go back to my cloud material now, what I want to do is I want to start preparing to add in that cloud atlas. That was kind of intentional, by the way. So again, I'm going to get my cloud sample attribute, and we're going to use the altitude again here. And for our altitude, what we're going to do is we are going to move through our curve that we've just created. So I'm going to do a curve, and we want our curve atlas row parameter. I'm just going to name this altitude. And we're going to come from our normal, plug that into there. And so really what we're doing here is we're using the curve to control for height of cloud. And what we're going to do here is set this to be our cloud, or our curve atlas altitude, as I say cloud atlas again, and then do our altitude there. And again, we're only working with the red channel. We don't care about the other channels, because we haven't set the other channels up. So we have that set up. What we're going to do, though, before we get there, is actually we're going to do a subtract. And this is to help control for our density. Actually, I lied. We're going to do one more thing first. We're going to use a saturate. Now, why am I not using a clamp? Well, simply because saturate is 0 cost. And with a clamp, it takes a little bit more, because what it's doing is it's checking these values and it's making sure you haven't said anything. At least that's my understanding of it. With a saturate, it just goes between 0 and 1 as a clamp. There's nothing else. And it's, as it says, free on most modern graphics hardware. So, yay, it's a bit better. And I'm going to change my subtract value here by adding in another scalar. Again, you could just hit subtract and change your beef instead of doing it this way. And I'm going to set this to a value of 0.5. I am then going to multiply in my atlas. So there's my multiply node, and I want to multiply in that red channel. And we'll explore how this really works in the next video. And I'm just going to move this over so that it doesn't cross as much. There we go. All right, after that, what we're going to do is we are going to lerp between our cloud coverage. So how many clouds do we actually have on screen? And because I'm going to violate my rule about adding these in, and I'm doing that because there's just so many nodes that we need for this to work. And I'm going to hit add. So we're adding in our clouds based on that lerp. So we're going to come down and do our lerp down here. And it's, again, a linear interpolate. We are going to go between -1 in the A and 1 in the B. Our alpha, and this is a placeholder, by the way, we're about to put in, is going to be a scalar parameter. And I'm going to call this density placeholder. I'm going to call it cloud density placeholder. And I'm going to actually put this in a category called master. And for this, our range is, well, 0 to 1. It's an alpha value. And I'm going to default it to 0.5. And this is definitely a placeholder. We're going to actually have a material function we'll create in the next video that goes here in place of this. That will be used by our weather system. Again, I want to do a cheap contrast. I want to get the contrast here, and we're going to actually set in some more contrasting. So we've done our detail contrast, and we want our overall cloud contrast. So promote to parameter. This will be cloud contrast. And again, for this, I am going to leave it at 0 for now, and I'm going to put this into my folder called clouds. And all this is doing is adding in our density. So this is density, and it keeps clouds in range from 0 to 1, where 0 is no clouds, and 1 is full coverage, overcast. And as a reminder, all a saturate node really is a clamp, and this is how much of the sky is covered. So this really is controlling how much of our sky is covered by our clouds. All right, let's make this comment box a bit bigger so I can move this, I guess. Move that there. And what we're going to do now is we are going to add this into our system over here. So this really is our clouds. Let's take these nodes, start moving it a bit closer. And density. Now, if you have more than one cloud type, really what we're doing here is we're creating our blend. Now, what I'm going to do is for every cloud type you have, you do want to clamp its value using a saturate. But because we only have one cloud type, I am not going to clamp it here. I'm going to clamp it elsewhere. So I'm still going to clamp it, and I'm going to clamp using that saturate node. Because remember, it's a cheap clamp. And I am going to then multiply this by our overall density. So I'm going to create a new variable, and this will be our overall density. And what we're going to do here is we're going to start at a value of 0.2. We will, sorry, not 0.2, 0.02. And we will go from 0 to 1. We will add this in, and really we could just skip this and go straight into our nodes up here. But this is if we are blending. So if blending multiple cloud types, this is where you set the blend of the clouds up. Because we only have one cloud type, it's fairly simple looking, but this can get really complex. Yeah, I might show you in the next video the prep for this, because I went through, I think, 4 different cloud setups before settling on this, and also deciding I couldn't make the textures I needed to. We are going to take this blend and we are going to do 2 things with it. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into that multiply. There we go. I'm going to put a reroute in. And the second thing we're going to do with this is, remember how I said we're going to fill this conservative density and elsewhere? We're going to come from here and go into that conservative density, if it will let me. Apparently it won't. Interesting. All right, plug into there. I'm going to put a reroute just so we go around all of this stuff that we're looking at inside of there. All right, line that up. And our cloud material, outside of some changes and adding in movement, is done. Let's go ahead and test this, because we're already 44 minutes, Jesus, into recording. Yeah, materials take a long time for me to explain, I realize. So I'm just going to go to my volumetric clouds. Under materials, I'm going to search for M custom clouds. And there we have our clouds. You can see it's very gray and overcast right now with our setup. We now have our clouds. They aren't moving, they aren't doing much, but hey, we have a little bit more of a nicer, realistic looking cloud setup. In the next video, what we'll do is actually have these clouds move. We'll have them change. We'll set up the colors a bit better. And we'll explore our various parameters. That said, that takes us through what we need to do in today's video. I am sorry for the length of this video. I'm hopeful the next one will be shorter. So I'm going to do a very quick outro then. This video, as always, has been brought to you by Patreon sponsors like Hanas, Rian, Connor, 1Volt10. If you've enjoyed setting up your cloud and you're enjoying how it's affecting the lighting, then make sure to hit that like button down below. If you want to be here when we start making these clouds move. And look how they hit that god right, jeez. Oh, our lightning system's still active, so let's activate our rain as well. Seems to fit the overcast mood. Then make sure to hit the subscribe and notify icon. Again, that's if you want to see the clouds move, you want to be able to set up the parameters a bit more clearly, see how that linear color curve works, then hit the subscribe and notify icon. As always, I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.